So on today's episode, we're going to be going through a checklist. Everybody should have a checklist on their vehicle before you take it out on the trail, before you go on a long wheeling trip, all that stuff. It may be common sense, but a lot of stuff gets forgotten and a lot of stuff gets left behind. So a lot of people are going to tell you to wash your vehicle first. I'm going to tell you, do an inspection on the vehicle first before you wash it. You're going to be able to see leaks. You're going to be able to see anything that's coming loose with a dirty vehicle. It's a lot easier to see that stuff. If you need some way of marking it, just wrap it with electrical tape or a piece of ribbon or something like that. That way you can find it when it's all washed up. So I'm gonna try not to make this as vehicle specific as possible, but everybody should be doing this stuff. Number one, check your fluids. So if you're running a manual, make sure you check your clutch fluid, make sure it's up in the reservoir. Check your brake fluid, check any of these brake lines up in here, make sure that they're not leaking. Power steering reservoir, and yeah, I know it's leaking. Coolant, that's probably a big one. Engine oil would be another big one, really easy to fix. You can change your air cleaner if you need to, and charge up your battery. Your alternator's job is to keep the battery maintained, not to charge it. So if this is getting low, make sure it's charged up before you hit the trail. Another real easy one at home, pull your winch line completely out, clean it if you've been running in the mud or sand a lot. Make sure, verify that it actually works. You don't want to get out on the trail, have this not work on you. So run it out, winch it back in, clean up your spool if that's what you need to do. Make sure it's all laid in there, you know, nice and tight. Get into some of the smaller stuff. Lug nuts, shearing lug nuts is a common occurrence. Lug nuts coming loose, your wheels start to wear in, lug nuts come loose. You don't have to check every lug nut, but at least put a torque wrench on 2 or 3 of them out of the set on each wheel. And then if you have RCV axle shafts, pull this outer hub off. If you're running ASN hubs or Warren hubs or whatever, and you got gun drilled RCV axle shafts or long field axle shafts, you can grease your CV axle from right here on the outside. Makes it very simple. Clean out a lot of this excessive dirt that's built up inside your high lift jack. Just brake clean it out, air it out, and then use some dry lube on it to keep the dust on the trail out of it. But then when you go to use it, you will want to spray WD-40 in here, but make sure all the springs are all good, all the pins are still working, your bar is not bent. So I'm huge on fire extinguishers. Make sure that your fire extinguisher's in good working order. Make sure that it's still charged, somebody hasn't set it off in a parking lot or something like that. Look on the inside, up in there. Make sure there's not a lot of dirt built up in there. Grease all your shackles, make sure that they're good. Another stupid one, make sure your spare tire's here, and you can air it up at home. That way you don't have to use any of your CO2 or take the time out on the trail to air it up. You can just put 15 pounds in it or whatever. Makes it a little easier. So my CO2 tank's currently getting low, so we'll take this to town and make sure that it's filled up before we hit the trail. So I have a video on all the tools I carry on my truck, and I usually go through it before a big wheeling trip. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a link up here. Verify that your stereo works. Nobody wants to go out on the trail without a stereo. Not that they go out very often, but we do blow speakers and we get stupid and, you know, like kind of wash the vehicle and water gets up in there. You know, I don't know. Hydraulic leaks on your hydraulic assist. On Toyotas, it's mounted on that side with the exhaust. So make sure that your lines are completely out of the way. Make sure that they're not being rubbed or getting pinched to where they're going to spray on the exhaust. Make sure you don't have any fuel leaks, all right? Fuel leaks are going to spark off on the trail, and that's one way to end your wheeling trip very fast is to have a fire. So that's one thing that you really want to look out for. Checking your lines. Coolant lines are a big one to go out because your body's twisting, you know, the frame is twisting, the motor's twisting. So if you got bad coolant lines, make sure you get those changed out while you're here at the house. If you got cracks in your belts, make sure that they're getting changed out while you're here at the house. It's very easy here at the house to change that stuff out. But if you wait till you're out on the trail, you know, it could be, depending on how far back in there you are, if you're an hour back in you're gonna have to either send somebody an hour back out to go to the auto parts store, or make sure you're carrying spares for that kind of stuff. Another one that people might not think about is check your welds, like up where your leaves mount up here, or the brackets in the back. Make sure that they're not cracking out around that. Any links, if you're running 4-link or 3-link, check your brackets that mounts the axle, check your brackets that mounts the frame. Make sure that they're not cracking out. It's very easy to weld it at the house versus using 2 12-volt batteries out on the trail. You know what I mean? Like, nobody likes to do that shit. Can you? Yeah, but when I could just use a grinder, grind out the crack right here at the house, and then weld it up. But before we climb under the vehicle, some other things to look at while you're up here on the top is verify that your rock lights are working. It's something that you don't use very often, but when you need them out on the trail, you need them. If you've made changes to the vehicle, make sure that you retighten your bolts up, especially these U-bolts. They'll start to work themselves loose, so retorque those. Pull the fill plug out of your differential, make sure that it's topped off and good to go. Check all your brake lines, make sure you don't have any leaks in your brake lines. So one thing that brought all this on was these front transfer case bolts were loose. The rear ones were completely missing. All these have been replaced and Loctited back in. If they start to come loose again, I'll just tack right on the edge of that bolt to the cross member to make sure that they don't come loose again. If you're running a homebrew drive shaft like that, make sure that your U-joints are good. It is horrible on U-joints. You can grease your U-joints while you're here. Make sure that they're good. All the bolts are there and tightened down. If you're running a Toyota front axle, make sure that your trunnion cap bolts are still in place and they're not sheared off. This is a very common place for these to shear off. Make sure that they're not sheared off. Your upper steer arms are still in place. All the bolts are intact on that. Most of that stuff's common sense, and I hope this helped. Just make sure you take the time, look over your rig before you go out on the trail, especially if you're hitting a big trail and you're going to be a long ways away from home. But thanks for watching, guys, and I hope that helped. Hope your next wheeling trip goes off without a hitch, and I hope you hit the trails and you get to see amazing things out there. All right, but watch these videos over here and make sure you pound that subscribe button.